Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right, we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right, we are.
That's right.
Hey, guess what? Christmas is just around the corner.
It is. It is just around the corner. Do you have any Christmas wishes?
My wish is for us to last another 260-something episodes.
Oh, yeah? Why? What happens after that?
I don't know. Maybe we give up.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. We stand on a battleship and we say mission accomplished.
I know where there's a battleship that we could do that on, and we can bring our own banner. Well, for the same price that it costs.
Yeah.
We could do that. 216 episodes more, I guess, is what we have left. Yeah, and then we could do an episode on any George W. Bush related video games.
Oh man, there's some weird bootleg video games about George W. Bush.
We can do that in our Mission Accomplished episode, which will be episode 520.
Enough of that. Seth, what have you been recently playing?
Recently, I've been playing Kingdom Come Deliverance, which was developed and published by Warhorse Studios. It was originally released back in February of 2018, and in it, you play as Henry, and people go, "Hey, it's Henry! Hey, Henry!" Kind of like Arthur in Red Dead Redemption 2. It's a open world RPG where you play as a guy. You play as the blacksmith's son, and there's a big moment in the beginning where your people that you love are wiped out, so you have to go on some quests, and you eventually chart your own path and explore a medieval Bohemia. It's very well done. Warhorse Studios is very good at historical recreations, and it feels like you're in a medieval town. And things happen, like when your character fighting's a little bit like it's all first person, except when you're doing like actions. So like if you're picking flowers, you see your character pick flowers. But it's all like first person outside of that. You see your character's hands, kind of first person mode. And then when you fight, it's very like drawn out, and you have to worry about your stamina as well as your strength and being able to hit people. It's a really cool game. There was a couple of things that have been essentially been on my mind, which led me to replay this game or restart it. I didn't beat it the first time I played it. There's plenty of game left for me to play. I did do a fresh restart since it's been a while since I played it last, but I've been watching a YouTuber, Modern History is what the YouTuber is called. And if you've ever watched Modern History, he's great. He's a man who really enjoys medieval history, dresses like a medieval person, and does walkie-talkie videos of him talking to the camera, usually sometimes in a forest or sometimes in his study, where he just calmly explains life in medieval culture. I've been watching a bunch of those videos learning about medieval culture, and I've been like thinking, I'm like, if only I could play the medieval culture. And I was like, there is a game where I could play as a peasant. Well, he's not a peasant. He is a son of a blacksmith. There's a big difference. Do you know what the big difference between peasant and a son of the blacksmith is?
One of them has a higher chance of getting a job?
Well, no. So Henry is part of a class of people that are townsfolks. That means that they live in a town. And there's the difference between them and serfs or peasants. And then there's also freedmen. So a serf or a peasant is someone who is servile and works the land for a lord.
Okay.
There is also a free man who is a free man who works the land, but he pays for that service. The difference between a serf and a free man is one works the land because he has to, and the other works the land and pays for it. But they still both have like rights and stuff like that. However, I've learned that if you are a serf and you don't want to be a serf, if you go to a town and you hide out in a town for like a year, you can become a townsperson, which is another class of individual. And when you're a townsperson, you belong to the town, and you do townsfolk things. And being a blacksmith in the town is a job. You get paid for your wages. But, like, you don't have to, like, listen to a lord in charge of your land because you're a townsfolk. You have to listen to the townsfolk people who are in charge of your land. And I just think it's kind of wild to think about, like, the way where, like, okay, you have a duke that runs this plot of land and has, like, various different farms on the land. But then there's, like, this city that has, like, its mayor or whatever. And the mayor respects the king, but ultimately doesn't respect the duke. You know, like, ultimately the mayor does whatever the mayor wants to do as long as abides by the king's rules. And the people that live in the town essentially follow the town rules and can do whatever the hell they want. They can't be like vagabonds, but so I think it's interesting. So Henry is not a peasant, nor is he a serf. He is a son of a blacksmith, which makes him townsperson and having various rights of being a townsperson. Except when your town gets burned down, then nobody cares about you.
Fair enough. And the feudal system was wild.
That feudal system was wild. So if you're interested in the feudal system or being a peasant, and by peasant I mean a son of a blacksmith.
Son of a blacksmith.
Kingdom, son of a blacksmith. You can play Kingdom Come Deliverance, where you can play Henry, who at the beginning of the game gets yelled at by his father for sleeping in because he was partying all night the night before. And then his dad's like, what are you doing? Also, just I want to say this before we don't talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance anymore. In order to level up your skills, you have to do an action. One of the easiest actions you can do is pick up flowers because
nice.
That is your herbalism action. So one of the ways that you can possibly make the game easier or like give yourself an advantage is that there's no time happening between the time that your dad gives you like your first quests and the time that you are not doing that first quest. You could do whatever you want. Time doesn't pass. Time does pass outside in the real game. But in this tutorial world where your dad's like, go get me some coal, if you don't go get that coal, time doesn't pass. So because that time doesn't pass, you can do activities around the town to build up your skills, like pick flowers.
Nice.
So my Henry has picked approximately close to 600 flowers. I call him Mr. Nettle because he has picked all the nettles in the town. He's in fact picked so many nettles that he has gotten bonuses to his vitality because he has picked so many poisonous nettles. He's also has some perks. One of the perks makes him more charismatic because he carries around a bunch of flowers that smell. And the other one gives him strength skills whenever he picks a flower because there's an animation of him bending down with his knees. And so there's a perk called leg day and you get strength as well as herbalism when you pick flowers. Yeah, that's what my Henry's been doing. So really I say that I've been playing Kingdom Come Deliverance, but really what I've been doing is playing Watch a Man Squat Simulator as I have watched him squat across this entire village while he's picked up hundreds upon hundreds of flowers and plants to get his herbalism skill up. And Zach, what have you been playing?
Well, Seth, recently I've been playing Alex Kidd in Miracle World DX.
Wow.
Which was released in 2021 by Merge Games. It's a remake of the first Alex Kidd game, Alex Kidd in Miracle World. And it's really fun, has some great colorful graphics, has some really catchy music. You can toggle actually graphics between the new HD, like redrawn graphics to the old Sega Master System style graphics and music by just clicking a button on your keyboard or your controller. It's really a fun time, but I'm not going to go too detailed into the game I've recently played because today we're talking all about Alex Kidd. We've talked about Alex Kidd before. We talked about him when we first talked about the history of Sonic back in episode 20, and we also brought him up again in episode 93, which was our episode on the Sega Master System. But we've never really dived into Alex Kidd and the various games that he is featured in. To be honest, I myself often get Alex Kidd confused with another Sega platformer, which came out around the same time. I think it actually came out the same year, which is Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy is a side-scrolling platformer where you play as a character and you bop around and you fight monsters. And it is moderately similar in that regards to Alex Kidd. But I think the reason I actually get them confused is because the naming structure of the second Wonder Boy game is Wonder Boy in Monsterland, which is very similar to the naming structure of Alex Kidd games, which, like the first one, is Alex Kidd in Miracle World. The games are very different otherwise. They just kind of have a similar naming structure, so I just wanted to include that little tangent that I get them confused.
Do you get them confused with like Tintin in Quebec?
Tintin in Quebec? Do you mean Tintin in Tibet?
No. That's a different comic. You haven't read it yet.
Oh, okay. The one where he goes to Quebec.
Yeah, he goes to Quebec.
And he has to stop the Quebecois from uprising.
It's a great Tintin book, but I can see how you can get that confused with Alex Kidd.
Now, development began on Alex Kidd back in 1984. At the time, the manga series Dragon Ball was starting to be published by Akira Toriyama and quickly gaining popularity. Sega saw dollar signs. They wanted to capitalize on the success of this growing manga series, so Sega snagged the rights to develop a game based on this new franchise. And they started to get to work on producing a tie-in video game that would have been a platformer where you play as Goku, the character of Dragon Ball.
So I really like Dragon Ball. I always felt like when I was a kid that Dragon Ball was kind of a timeless like manga. Obviously there's plenty of animes about it, but like the manga was coming out in the 80s and part of the 80s before I was even born.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid discovering like Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, I didn't really comprehend how like old it was.
Now, Sega got to work on developing this Dragon Ball game. However, they spent too much time working on it. The rights to the game would actually lapse, and they would go back to the rights holder. And I think, or literally just a few years later, in 86, Bandai would grab the rights to do the first Dragon Ball game, which was released on the Super Cassette Vision. And then later, a Dragon Ball game would be released on the NES and Famicom. In Japan, it was called Dragon Ball. In America, it was called Dragon Power, because we didn't know what Dragon Ball was. Now, Sega, they did not keep the rights to Dragon Ball, so they had this game that they were developing that was kind of like Dragon Ball, but it wasn't Dragon Ball anymore. Sega CEO Hayao Nakayama didn't try to fight to get the rights back. Instead, he asked the developers to rework the game as an original IP. The character of Alex Kidd himself would be created by Kotaro Hayashida, who pulled inspiration for the character from different places. For one, he was inspired by the character of Billy Lowe from the 1978 film Game of Death, Billy Lowe portrayed by Bruce Lee. He was also inspired by the character of Sun Wukong from Journey to the West, which was fitting because Goku from Dragon Ball is also inspired by Sun Wukong and Bruce Lee. So Hayashida said, I'm going to take the same characters that influenced the guy we almost made a game about and use them to make my guy. The influences of Goku and Bruce Lee can be seen in how Alex Kidd appears. He wears a jumpsuit very similar to what Bruce Lee wears, except his is red instead of yellow. And taking from Sun Wukong, Alex Kidd is kind of drawn with an almost monkey-like appearance to almost resemble the Monkey King. Now, one of the original plans for the game was that Alex Kidd would wield the staff that Sun Wukong wields, the Ryujingu Bang. And this was also going to be a game that was intended to be an action RPG. However, in 1985, a little game called Super Mario Bros. Would be released in Japan and then later released in the US, and this character of Mario was becoming popular a little too fast for Sega to know what to do. Sega saw the writing on the wall. Mario was in, and they needed something to beat Mario. So they revised the game again, and they came up with a platformer that had a similar colorful aesthetic to what Mario has. The game did retain some elements from its original RPG, with bosses often having dialogue windows that appear just prior to combat. Beyond this though, the game plays like a standard platformer. You jump around, you punch enemies, and occasionally you pick up power-ups such as a motorcycle that gives you a burst of speed, and bosses will range from you either beating them up or you play rock, paper, scissors against them. The worlds you travel to are colorful, filled with various items that are hidden in blocks that can be collected, and you play as the titular Alex Kidd, who learns that the evil Jenkin the Great has defeated the king of Redaxian, King Thunder, though in some translations he's called King Thor, and Redaxian is a city on the planet of Ares. Jenkin has kidnapped Prince Eagle and Princess Laura. Alex learns that he's actually the long-lost brother of Prince Eagle, so he goes to save them, and he does this by jumping over things, punching people, and playing rock, paper, scissors. When the game came out in the US, there was some minor localization, specifically changing the onigiri that Alex eats into a hamburger, and the game did really well in terms of critical reviews. A 1991 review from Computer and Video Games said that it was, quote-unquote, Sega's answer to Mario, and described it as having gameplay that will, quote-unquote, have you glued to your screen. The game also scored an 82% from the UK gaming magazine The Game Machine and a 95% from Sega Pro Magazine.
The game also did well enough to be integrated into later releases of the Sega Master System. So when you bought the Master System 2, the game was built into the ROM of the system, allowing you to boot without a cartridge and play Alex Kidd in Miracle World. So if you were all alone with no Sega Master games and all you had was a Sega Master 2, don't worry, Alex Kidd was pre-installed and you could just boot right into it and play it without any cartridges, which was great. The next Alex Kidd game would release the same year as the first game, 1986. Originally released in arcades, Alex Kidd The Lost Stars is a different type of game than the first. While the game retains the bright, colorful worlds that the first game had, the gameplay is far more simple. You simply move to the right and jump over enemies. You are given the option of having a second player join you, and her name is Stella, and she wears a similar outfit to Alex, but instead of red, it's blue. At least it's not green.
Yeah.
Now, The Lost Stars features a plot involving Alex and Stella searching for the 12 zodiac signs to find the Zodiac Killer. They need to search. I don't know why they need to find them, but anyway, it's not to find the Zodiac Killer. They need to search the land to find various signs and unlock the entrance to the Ziggurat, a holy land that contains a mystical shrine. Now, once you get to the shrine, you repeat the game, but this time there are different enemies. The arcade game was ported to the Master System, with one of the main differences being that the fact that you are given unlimited lives in the home version as opposed to a limited number of free lives. The arcade version also has cooperative play, which the home version lacks. The arcade version did well, being ranked by Japan's Game Machine magazine as the 13th most successful arcade unit in February of 1988. When the game came to the Master System, the publication Computer and Video Games rated it an 80%. Later reviews have been more critical, comparing it negatively against its predecessor. Next up, in 1987, Sega put out Alex Kidd High-Tech World. And what's interesting is that this is only an Alex Kidd game outside of Japan. Rather, the game started out as an adaptation of Animitsu Hime, or Princess Animitsu, a popular manga series that was out at the time. And when the game was to be localized, Sega said, this is not going to sell outside of Japan, so let's just make it an Alex Kidd game to make it more palatable for the Western market. Kind of like how they did Super Mario Brothers 2, where they took that game and said, you know what, let's just make this Mario, and then it will sell. The game is notable as having no characters from the rest of the Alex Kidd series beyond the main hero, and introducing Alex's brother, James, who we only meet in this game and never meet again. The story involves Alex being invited to High-Tech World, a new arcade in his town. The map he gets of the arcade, however, is ripped up, so he has to find the missing pieces before the arcade closes at 5 p.m. This is 87, so well before any GPS or anything like that nature, so let alone he can go to a phone book. But now to find the pieces, you must solve puzzles, answer questions, and do various errands. You finally get to leave your house, but on your way to the arcade, you get attacked by ninjas, as you do. The game was not as well received as the previous Alex Kidd games, but still earned a 76% from the publication Computer and Video Games, and a 76% from the publication Mean Machines Sega. Another brief departure in the franchise was Alex Kidd BMX Trial, released only in Japan. This game is a spin-off where Alex Kidd must go through a BMX race against various other riders. You can collect various power-ups like a rocket that will propel you forward, and you also have to jump over various obstacles throughout the game.
Now, Alex made his first jump to the 16-bit Sega Mega Drive / Genesis in 1989 with the release of Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle. This would also be Alex's last leap into the 16-bit world, as it's the only game in the series to be released on the Mega Drive / Genesis. Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle is considered a proper sequel to Alex Kidd in Miracle World. King Thunder may still be alive, so Alex goes searching for him, and to do so, he has to go through an adventure, as he usually does, getting distracted by fighting various bad guys and playing rock, paper, scissors. Alex in the Enchanted Castle is an interesting game. I played it before. I played through parts of it. It is pretty simple, I would say. You know, the thing about the Alex Kidd games is when you play them on the Master System, they can kind of be forgiven, right? The Master System is an 8-bit console, a little bit similar to the NES, a little bit more powerful in some places, I think, but when you play a game like Alex Kidd, you're like, you know what? It's simple, but it's enjoyable because you have the context of this being a system from the 80s. Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle is on the Sega Genesis, which is the same console that gave us Desert Strike, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Vector Man, Rystar, Herzog's Way, Dune 2. The Sega Genesis is a powerful system that has some incredible things that it can do for its hardware and incredible games on its library. Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle looks like an 8-bit game that they just put on the Sega Genesis. And it plays like that too. It's very simplistic, and the critics were rough on it. Eurogamer would give it a 4 out of 10, GameSpot would give it a 3.8 out of 10, and Megatech would give it a 68%. And a lot of the reviews at the time just called the game repetitive. One review was from Dan Whitehead over at Eurogamer, who said that the collision in the game is abominable, and noted that victory comes from blind luck because most of the levels end with you having to do a rock, paper, scissors section.
I also do want to say that Alex Kidd on the Sega Genesis did come out in 1989, which, if you look up when the Sega Genesis came out, is the same year.
That's fair.
So
that was fair.
It was developed for a game system that wasn't in the market at any point in time, right? It was probably a launch title or close to it, and it was developed on something new for all the developers getting those dev kits of the Sega Genesis probably didn't have much time with it either.
Well, it was developed by Sega.
Yeah, even just because you work for a company doesn't mean that you're going to get time.
That's fair.
I can imagine them already in flight with a Sega Master game, and then them getting dropped the dev kit and being like, by the way, in 3 months we're going to release the Genesis. Please put Alex Kidd on it, and them just porting whatever they did onto the Sega Genesis.
I can agree with that in the sense that it was an early game for the Genesis, but the problem is there were better early games for the Genesis that were bundled with the Genesis. Altered Beast was 89 and Space Harrier 2. So, if you went to the store, let's say you bought Space Harrier 2 and Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle. Space Harrier 2 has 3D graphics, and Alex Kidd looks like...
Who developed Space Harrier?
Sega.
Maybe Sega spent some time on things that they could have otherwise spent on the Alex. Yeah. Maybe they bit off a little bit more than they could chew.
I think a lot of it breaks down to the way Sega built their games was they often split into sub-departments, so it was like AM1 and AM2. I think Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle was done by AM7, which, that's 7 down the line. They probably were getting just the dregs of stuff at that point. Now, finally, we come to actually the last of the Alex Kidd games that came out back in the 1990s, and actually the last of the Alex Kidd game in general. And Alex Kidd in Shinobi World, released in 1990, would not come out in the Sega Genesis. It would actually come out back on the Master System, which is wild. I mean, this is 1990. It's still pretty early in the Mega Drive's lifespan, but if you think about it, the Master System wasn't doing super hot in the United States, so they were really banking on the European crowd with this release. Alex Kidd in Shinobi World is a semi-crossover / parody of the Sega game Shinobi. The plot sees Alex Kidd having to save his girlfriend from the evil Hanzo, the Dark Ninja, who kidnaps her when they are hanging out on planet Shinobi, which I like that they don't go to Earth. They go to planet Shinobi, which is a planet dedicated to Shinobi. I hope there are other planets out there dedicated to other Sega games. Now, reportedly, based on some images that surfaced on the internet back in 2000, the game originally was not going to be an Alex Kidd game. Instead, it was intended to be just a cutesy parody of Shinobi, akin to other cutesy parodies that had come out on other systems like Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti on the Famicom, or Parodius, which is a parody of Gradius. However, at some point, they shifted to put Alex Kidd into it, and thus gave us Alex Kidd in Shinobi World. The game itself is broken into 4 different rounds, with missions based on the original Shinobi game, and Alex now has not only the ability to punch that he had from before, but he can also wall-to-wall jump. He can spin around from a street post or a rope or a pole, thus giving him a burst of energy that turns him into a fireball, and he can also use throwing stars or swords. Also, another fun fact is during development, one of the bosses in the game was going to be called Mari-O and was designed to look like Mario. They changed him a bit before development, changing his name to Kabuto and redesigning the character to make him a little less looking like Mario. Alex Kidd in Shinobi Land was a return to form in terms of the critical reception. Computer and Video Games gave it a 92%, Sega Pro gave it an 88%, and Game Mania would give it a 90%. And Alex Kidd in Shinobi Land is a pretty solid game. It's a fun little platformer. If you like Shinobi, you would probably like Alex Kidd in Shinobi Land. And Shinobi is also a great game. It's one of those games that we haven't talked about, but we probably should.
Yeah, we should. Also seems like one of the highest scoring Alex Kidds in regards for critical reception, at least.
I think it was, yeah.
Now, while Alex Kidd's last game was released in 1990, he still appears in various other games. His sprite appears in the background of Altered Beast as a hieroglyph on some of the statues. He showed up in Shenmue and Shenmue 2 as a Gachupon collectible, along with that other character that we mentioned,
Rystar and Sonic.
So Rystar, Alex Kidd, and Sonic all appeared as Gachupon collectibles in Shenmue and Shenmue 2. He also appears in the Sega All-Stars racing games and in the RPG Sega Gaga for the Dreamcast, which I believe also Rystar appears in those.
Yes, Rystar appears in both of those. Rystar is not a playable driver in the All-Star racing game, but Alex Kidd is. He has a motorcycle.
Nice. Is Rystar a villain?
No, Rystar appears as a flag bearer in the first one.
Oh, like a sexy lady.
Yeah, he's just like waving a flag, and then in one of them he's just like, you just see him in the background, just like standing there waving.
The Alex Kidd games have also seen re-releases on various collections. Outside of the video games, both Alex Kidd and Stella appeared in the Archie run of Sonic the Hedgehog during the Worlds Collide crossover event with the Mega Man comic, and there was also a release in the 2020. Alex Kidd was just released that Zach was playing.
Yeah, the re-release Alex Kidd in Miracle World DX released in 2021, which is a reimagining, reworking of the first Alex Kidd game. Again, it makes the graphics look nice and beautiful. The music is catchy. It overall is a fun way to play the game. It also is another reason why I get confused with Wonder Boy, because Wonder Boy also saw a release around the same time, like with a full reimagining. So, classic Sega games, just getting me all confused. Well, that's going to do it for our Alex Kidd episode. If you have any memories or thoughts about Alex Kidd, let us know. One thing I wanted to touch upon is I do think it's interesting that I'm pretty sure Alex Kidd never came out on the Game Gear, which I find very interesting because I feel like Alex Kidd on the Game Gear would have been a nice competitor to Mario Land on the Game Boy. Alex Kidd was called Sega's Mario, so it would have kind of made sense, at least to me, to maybe bundle Alex Kidd in with the Game Gear. We did have other Game Gear ports of Master System games. It wasn't that hard. They're basically the same console. So a little interesting. I don't know. Just a fun thought.
I think if it's one thing that we can expect Sega to do is follow logic.
Yeah, that's fair. But who knows? Maybe someday Alex Kidd will return. Maybe there'll be an Alex Kidd movie. Sega has been doing, they have their like movie cinematic universe they're building right now with Sonic, and I heard there's a House of the Dead movie being developed and a Altered Beast movie, I think, in the works. A Comic Zone movie in the works. There is a Comic Zone movie in development. So maybe someday we'll get Alex Kidd in one of those movies. Now, getting into our retro rewind, Seth, do you want to go first?
Sure. Zach had me play Iron Man and Exo Manowar in Heavy Metal, a video game that is not only a mouthful, but did come out. It was developed by Real Time Associates, which sounds like a realtor firm, and it was published by Acclaim Entertainment. You play as Iron Man, or you play as Exo Manowar. There's a bio in the beginning of when you select your character, where you pick either Anthony Stark or the Exo Manowar person, and Anthony Stark is like 6 and change and like 250 pounds or something like that. Exo Manowar, according to the game, is 7 foot tall and 450 pounds.
I like how you're calling Tony Stark Anthony Stark, like you're like writing him.
That's what the game calls him.
I know, that's still very good.
But it just, Exo Manowar is just a massive man. But just like, according to the game, I'm like, why is he's like double Anthony Stark? It's crazy. Anyway, the game was released in 1996 for both the North American and worldwide audience for the PlayStation, Sega Saturn, MS-DOS, and there was also a game developed by Kryptonite Games for the Game Boy, and I also assume the Game Gear, because it doesn't specify who developed the Game Gear game. I just really hope that the guys who were developing for Game Boy also developed the Game Gear, but I could be wrong. It could have also been Real Time Associates that developed for the Game Gear. Regardless, it's an action scroller game because you conduct action while you scroll just around the screen, and you play as either Iron Man or Exo Manowar. And you get to blast enemies and fly around the mission. I didn't read the mission briefing, so I was just blasting everyone in the first mission. However, I did read the manual because the controls on the MS-DOS version are confusing as F. In fact, even the manual thought they were confusing, as there are a couple of buttons that just have "not in yet" it printed in giant words next to what action they do.
Oh, that's so good.
When back in the day, when games were released on physical media and there was not a way to actually update them remotely, and you printed manuals in paper, putting "not in yet" in all caps next to a button action, just not a good look. Now, the way that things control is on the MS-DOS. The arrow keys control your movement. Then there's Alt and Control that are used for jumping. And then the keys for L, comma, and like semicolon are like your shooting and kicking buttons. So if you think that you have to like have this weird movement where you have to use really tight hand on the keys, like the movement arrow keys, and then like right next to it another hand on the random buttons that don't make any sense that do things. I had the manual open and I was having difficulty trying to figure out what things could do. If you double tap up and shoot, you could shoot things in the background of the game. I didn't learn about that until I was trying to figure out where I had to go next, and I figured I could shoot some doors open, and that wasn't where I had to go. I had to somehow like fly up somewhere else. It was confusing. The game could also be played cooperatively with both players playing as either Iron Man and Exo Man of War, or both could play as Iron Man or Exo Man of War. So if you both were big fans of Iron Man or big fans of Exo Man of War, you could play as them together. So two Iron Mans could be taking on the world. The game plays pretty simplistic. The controls are pretty convoluted and poor, and that kind of puts a damper on the fun. If this game was released on the Sega Genesis, it probably would have been pretty good. Like if it was a 2D action side scroller game, it would have been fine. But it wasn't released on the Sega Genesis. It was released on the Sega Saturn. And it's just not a great game for the 32-bit era. It would have been a passable game in the 16-bit era. Now, it's not a crime against humanity like some of the games that Zach has had me play in the past, but for sure, you don't need to play it. However, just a side note, the game did get a 2-issue comic book crossover where two heroes team up to save the world, but in only 2 issues, the problem probably wasn't that overly complex. Zach, next week, you could also play a game from the Real-Time Associates catalog, and you can play Crusader No Remorse for MS-DOS.
Great. Sounds good. Now, Seth had me play Alien Rampage. Released in 1996 by Inner Circle Creations, I was worried about this game. I hadn't heard of it before. I think the name has popped up before, so I quickly did a Google search to see if I can learn anything about it. There was no Wikipedia page, which is never a good sign. However, I was pleasantly surprised. It was actually a lot of fun. It's a 2D run and gun where you play as a guy who kind of looks like the Predator from Predator, but only in a way that is legally distinct. So they said, let's draw the Predator, and they said, let's color him green and change his face just a little bit, and done. Your character gets locked up in an alien prison cell, and you escape, and then as the rest of the name of the game implies, you in fact go on a rampage. You run around and you shoot other aliens, and they explode.
You're an alien?
Yes.
And you get arrested by other aliens.
Yes.
And then you escape your prison and you kill other aliens.
Yeah, the other aliens, at least in the first part of like the first level and so, are these like giant snails. And they
Are you related to these aliens?
Definitely not, because your guy looks like the Predator.
Was he like on another planet and like was like drunk and disorderly?
No, I think he got like captured.
Put into, like,
I think
snail prison.
I think they like hunt other aliens for sport.
And then they put him into prison. So he wasn't just like at the bar, like, and he was too rough, and the snails were like, "Sir, you got to come."
He
with
might
us."
have been. My favorite thing is, so when the game starts, you're like in this little cell, and next to you is this hairy guy that kind of looks like Chewbacca.
That is another alien.
Well, I hope so. Otherwise, it's a naked hairy man that looks like Chewbacca.
I mean, it could be.
So if you shoot in his direction, he'll duck, so you can't hurt him. But if you shoot like a computer screen, it turns off his cell, and he'll leave the cell, and he'll just open your cell, and then he doesn't do anything else.
Well, that's nice. Does he have any dialogue?
No, not that I could figure out. I didn't like talk to him. So also, when you spawn into the cell, you still have your weapon on you. So the people who arrested you were kind of incompetent because they're like, we're going to throw you in jail, but we're going to leave the large laser rifle.
Maybe the snails thought it was your appendage.
Maybe
they don't have any appendages, right? They only have a tongue, right? So like ultimately, Are they giant snails or are they like snail people?
No, they're like giant snails.
That's great. Do they have guns on their shells?
No, they attack you by they spit at you.
It's wild. I would not want to be on that, live on that planet.
Also, when you kill them, they explode. They just explode into gore. It's a pretty fun game. It's it's a running gun. It's almost like Contra in the sense that you can shoot in a bunch of different directions, and I liked it. I did notice some of the sound effects were definitely lifted from Doom, or at least from the same sound library that Doom used, and I think that was just because it was the 1990s and everyone used the same sound libraries. I don't think they were trying to rip off Doom per se, though it does have a similar menu structure in that you start a new game and then you choose a difficulty that isn't clearly labeled. So it's not easy, medium, hard. It's bring it on and teach me a lesson and those type of difficulties. But yeah, fun game. I think it holds up in a weird way. If you get the chance to play it, you'll probably like it if you like run and gun games. It is, again, a bit gory. So if you're not a big fan of aliens that explode into blood messes, then maybe stay away, but it's kind of cartoony. I wouldn't say it's realistic blood and gore. Next week, Seth, you can play Deadly Towers for the NES.
Sweet. I'm looking forward to that.
Well, that will do it for our Alex Kidd episode. I want to thank everyone for listening. If you have any memories of Alex Kidd, be sure to let us know. You can do so by emailing us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available on all the different social medias, be it Facebook or Instagram or what have you. We're available on Blue Sky, all those places. Just look us up. If you're on a website and you want to find the Classic Gaming Brothers, type in Classic Gaming Brothers, and if no one shows up, type in CG Brothers Pod. We're going to be one of those. On our website, though, if you go there, classicgamingbrothers.com, you can, of course, listen to our episodes or buy some merch, buy our shirt or our mug or what have you. Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.